Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to read chapter 4 from Frindle by Andrew Clements. So chapter 4 is called Word Detective. See? So again, like I always ask you, think about the title, Word Detective. So think about, what does a detective do? You're thinking, right? So Nick, remember that we left off where Mrs. Granger had asked him to do the research himself because he asked where do all those words come from, and so therefore the title kind of tells me now. It says Word Detective. So Nick, I'm thinking, I hope you're thinking the same thing, he is gonna have to go research just the way the teacher asked him to do. So Word Detective. So let's begin. Chapter 4. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Bright sun, cool breeze, blue skies, but not for Nick. Poor Nick, right? So it was a beautiful day, but he had homework to do. 2 homeworks, remember? He would have only had 1, but because he wanted to be the time stopper and wanted to kind of trick Mrs. Granger, he now has 2 homeworks. It was a beautiful September afternoon, bright sun, cool breeze, blue sky, but not for Nick. Nick had to do a little report for the next day, plus copy all of the definitions for 35 words for Mrs. Granger. This was not the way school was supposed to work. Not for Nick. There was a rule at Nick's house. Homework first. Now, I hope that's the rule at your house too. Homework first and then play. I've always told you that. So there was the same rule at Nick's house. Homework first and then play. And that meant right after school. Nick had heard his older brother James groan and grumble about this rule for years, right up until he graduated from high school 2 years ago. So now I'm also learning that Nick has an older brother who already graduated from high school. It seems like it's 2 years have already passed, and I bet that one of his teachers was Mrs. Granger too. And then James one day wrote home from college after his first semester and said, "My grades are looking great because when I came here, I already knew how to put first things first." That letter was the proof Nick's mom and dad had been waiting for. Homework first was the law from September to June. You see, even his older brother learned that you always have to do homework first and then do the rest of the stuff. And so the older brother sent a letter from college saying that because he used to do that when he was at home, now that he's in college by himself, this has helped him to be able to do his work first and then do the rest of the stuff. But Nick was not happy about it. This had never bothered Nick before because he hardly had any homework. Oh, sure, he looked over his spelling words on Thursday nights, and there had been a few short book reports in 4th grade. But other than that, nothing. Up to now, schoolwork never spilled over into his free time. Thanks to Mrs. Granger, those days were gone. Well, it's his fault, I think, right? What do you think? First, he looked up the definitions in the brand new red dictionary that his mom had bought because Mrs. Granger told her to. It took almost an hour. He could hear a baseball game in John's yard down the street, yelling and shouting, and every few minutes the sharp crack of a bat connecting with a pitch. But he had a report to do for Mrs. Granger. He wanted to be out with his friends playing, but he had extra homework. Nick looked at the very front of the dictionary. There was an introduction to the book called Words and Their Origins. Perfect, Nick thought. It was just what he needed to do for his report. It will all be over in a few minutes. Nick could already feel the sun and the breeze on his face as he ran outside to play homework, and then his homework would be all done. Then he read the first sentence from the introduction. And so, let me read you the first sentence from the introduction from the dictionary. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. All of those words, so confusing to me. Even to me, I'm like, what? Unparalleled etymological, lexicographic scholarship, all those words, but that's what it says at the beginning of the dictionary. What? See? What? Nick scratched his head and read it over and over again and again and then again. Not much better. He couldn't understand it. It was sort of like trying to read the ingredients on a shampoo bottle. Have you ever tried that? Like all the words there are like hard to read, confusing. He slammed the dictionary shut and walked downstairs. Nick's family did a lot of reading, so bookshelves covered 3 of the 4 walls in the family room. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias. The black set was for the grown-ups, and the red set was for the kids. So encyclopedias is another book that we don't use much anymore because, again, everything is in the internet, right? So the encyclopedias, if you needed to find information about something, let's say you wanted to find out about the moon, so you will go to the letter M and look for moon, and then it will give you all kinds of information about the moon. Or if you were studying about whales, so you will go to the W and then look for whale, for the word whales, and then you give you all kinds of information on whales. Nowadays, you just put whales on the search and a whole bunch of stuff comes up, right? So that's what an encyclopedia does. And so Nick went downstairs to where his parents have all these books, and he found the encyclopedias, and there's 2 sets. It says there were 2 sets of encyclopedias. The black set was for grown-ups, and the red set was for the kids. Nick pulled out the D volume from the red set and looked up dictionary. There were 3 full pages with headings like early dictionaries, word detectives, and dictionaries today. Not very exciting, but he had to do it. So Nick just plopped down on the couch and read it all. He read all of it. And when he was finished with the kids' book, the kids' encyclopedia, he opened up the black encyclopedia and read most of what it said about dictionaries too. He understood only about half of what he read. Again, so it's kind of complicated. All the reading that he's doing is kind of hard, and he understood only half of what he read. He leaned back on the couch and covered his eyes with his arm, trying to imagine himself giving a report on all this boring stuff. He'd be lucky to have 3 minutes worth, but because Nick was Nick, he suddenly had an idea, and he brought a grin to his face. He's like, What do you think he's thinking about? What might his idea be? I mean, what can he do with all of this thing that he's learning about? Nick decided that giving this report could actually be fun. Fun? He could make it into something special. After all, Mrs. Granger had asked for it. So he's thinking that he's gonna do something about this. I'm gonna reread the very last paragraph. It says, Nick decided that giving this report could actually be fun. he could make it into something special. After all, Mrs. Granger had asked for it. I'm not sure what he's thinking. What do you think he's planning to do? Will his plan work? Or is it going to backfire on him again? So I'll leave you with that question to think about. Okay, so think about that. Will his new plan work? And really, what is his plan? He says he decided that giving his report could actually be fun. He could make it into something special. After all, Mrs. Granger had asked for it. I'm wondering. Before I leave you today, I wanted to show you a picture of Nick where he's trying to do his work. See that picture there? There's Nick with his glasses, and you see all the papers and the encyclopedia and all the stuff that he's there. He's trying to, and you see there's a picture of a baseball in the back because he loves to play baseball. So that's something else. And so there he is. And so that's the end of chapter 4. And so don't forget to answer the questions. Okay? Bye, boys and girls.